Welcome to this week's edition of Madisyn with the News. Today we are going to be talking about this year's deadliest mass shooting and gun laws in the United States. On October 25th around 7 p.m., a gunman opened fire at a bowling alley in Lewiston, Maine, and a few minutes later there were reports of another shooting at a bar and grill just a 12-minute drive away from the first scene. According to ABC, the gunman, now identified as Robert R. Card, who is a 60-year-old Army reservist, fatally shot 18 people and injured 13 others. After a two-day manhunt, Card was identified dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Card's body was identified near a recycling center, his former place of employment in Libson Falls, Maine. According to ABC, about 3 months before the mass shooting occurred, Card tried to buy a silencer at a local firearms store. In an interview with Rick LaChapelle, the owner of the local firearms store that Card tried to purchase the silencer from, says, "He came in and filled out the form. He checked out a box that incriminated himself, saying that he was in an institution." LaChapelle says his employees handled the situation well by calmly explaining why they could not sell the silencer to Mr. Card. According to the Maine legislature, it states that a person may not own, possess, or have control of that person's firearm if they have been in a mental institution. And this law doesn't just apply to the state of Maine. Every state in the United States has federal laws in place for prohibiting possession of firearms and ammunition to people who have been diagnosed with a mental illness or have been involuntarily put into a mental facility. While the employees at LaChapelle's local firearms store did their jobs correctly by not selling Mr. Card the silencer, it appears that Card has obtained the rest of his firearms legally, despite spending time in a mental facility. And for this we can blame Maine's gun laws. According to the New York Times, a few months before the Maine mass shooting, Maine's legislature considered 3 new bills that would tighten the state's gun restrictions. The first bill would require a criminal background check for gun purchases. The second bill would create a 72-hour waiting period before someone could pick up their purchased items. And the last bill would outlaw modifications that would make semi-automatic weapons more deadly. Each of these bills were declined in the Maine Senate, with the majority voting against these new bills. This is one of the main reasons why Maine is considered 25th in the country for strictness on gun laws. Maine is one of the few democratic states that has a long history of refusing gun restriction laws. The mass shooting in Lewiston has citizens calling in for more gun restriction laws, but in an interview with Mark Brewer, a political science professor at the University of Maine, says if Maine is talking about restricting gun rights, then they're going to have a hard time because most of Maine's political power remains in the state's mountains. The people are unlikely to be swayed for gun restriction laws because of the guns they use to hunt. Now, while it may seem like Maine being 25th in the country for strictness on gun laws is a good thing, they have minimal to almost no gun law restrictions. According to everytownresearch.org, the foundational gun laws that Maine does have in place include a no-shoot first law and a law to require gun owners to have a secure storage for their firearms. The gun laws Maine has in place when an individual is in public include a mandate that prohibits guns on college campuses and in K-12 schools. Guns are also prohibited at state capitals and political protests. Maine has quite a few laws in place to keep guns out of the wrong hands, but after recent events, there is more they can do in this category to keep the people of Maine safe. Maine has a felony prohibitor and a fugitive from justice prohibitor, which bars gun possession from people with felony convictions and from fugitives. Maine also bars gun possession from people who have committed violent offenses, from convicted domestic abusers, and from domestic abusers who are under restraining orders. Lastly, Maine has a mental health record reporting law that allows officials to report prohibiting records into the background check system, so people who may be a danger to themselves or to others cannot gain possession of a firearm. Now, while it may seem like Maine has a good amount of gun laws in place, they are missing a lot of laws that most states adapted to keep their people safe. For example, Maine does not require background checks for handgun purchases. The state does not require a permit to conceal carry a weapon. They have not yet prohibited assault weapons. They do not have a ghost guns regulator, which ensures gun parts or guns cannot be sold without serial numbers and a background check. There is also no program for gun removal in Maine, which requires officials to identify and remove any illegal guns. The state does not have a minimum age to purchase a gun either. Maine also does not allow its towns and cities to make their own gun safety policies. Most importantly, Maine does not have a law against bringing a concealed carry weapon into a bar. Now, this is not to say having this law in place would have stopped the mass shooting from happening altogether, but it could have potentially saved a lot of lives. In a study conducted by Patrick Sharkey and Megan Kang from Princeton, the researchers came to the conclusion that despite the killings in Maine last week, the United States has made progress over the last few decades when it comes to American gun violence. The study shows that when stricter gun laws were passed by 40 states from 1991 to 2016, gun deaths were reduced by nearly 10% nationwide. In a graphic provided by the New York Times, we can see the more restrictive gun regulations a state has, the lower the gun death rate. For example, the top 5 states in the country with the highest gun law strength composite scores are California at number 1 with a composite score of 86.5. The next is New York with a composite score of 81.5, Hawaii at number 3 with a score of 79.5, number 4 is New Jersey with a score of 79, and lastly we have Connecticut with a composite score of 78.5. Based on this chart, we can see that the higher the composite score, which means more gun restrictions, each of these states has, the lower the gun death rates are. While there is no law that can be put in place to stop all mass shootings, it is clear that the more restrictions a state has, the lower the gun death rate continues to be. To find out more about what the gun laws are in your state, visit everytownresearch.org/rankings. And that's it for this week's edition of Madisyn with the News. I'll see you here next time.